As we pray our night prayers at home during this Ramadan lockdown, should we recite from the few surahs that we know by heart, or can we read from the Mus'haf? This question is important because it reminds us that actually the night prayer is upon us individually, and it's not a condition for it to be performed in the mosque. In actual fact, the Prophet ﷺ, his own personal practice was to pray it at home, as well as many of the companions, and it's only for the benefit of the masses who don't know so much Quran that they need to be led by someone who can complete the Quran with them so that they can hear the complete Quran as it was revealed in this blessed month that we have the Taraweeh prayer. So almost, in fact, the Ramadan lockdown is returning us back to our normal asl, our basic status quo in the Sunnah, which is the night prayer ourselves at home. The problem, of course, is that we don't know so much surahs from the Quran. That lack of variety, we're restricted maybe to a few of the last the 30th juz, the Juz Amma, and it doesn't then become very wholesome, or it doesn't become very exciting, and you want to cover more. How do you balance between this? Is it permissible to hold something, to use the Quran or a phone or something like that? In principle, you need to know that movement in the prayer and fidgeting in the prayer is a big no-no. However, there are levels. In the obligatory prayer, it's very restricted. There's very little movement which is allowed. And even then though, if the case on a case-by-case basis, if the situation arises, there are certain actions which are allowed. The supererogatory prayer, however, the nafil prayer, what some people call sunnah, which is qiyamul layl, is far less restricted. It's more flexible. It is possible for you to do a little bit of movement. For example, even pray while sitting down, even praying as the Prophet ﷺ would, whilst on a camel, on the move, and so on and so forth. And so therefore, it is permissible in the supererogatory prayers like the night prayer for you to actually read from something and turn its pages. Personally, I prefer that you use a phone or an iPad or something that is digital, which has less movement required as opposed to the big turning and so on, and you keep it close to one's chest. You are able to at least have one hand on your chest or below the navel according to the fiqh position that you follow, where your hand should be, and only using one hand to hold the phone itself and just one then to turn the page when needed. I think this is something which is allowed and something which is also good. Why? Well, first of all, we have some precedent. Aisha radiallahu anha, her servant Dhakwan, he would lead Aisha radiallahu anha in the night prayer at home. Now he would know less, which is important, by the way, which shows that even if the one knows less but they're a male, they should lead the prayer. And Aisha radiallahu anha has a huge knowledge of the Quran, its memorization, its understanding, yet she still wants to preserve that basic principle of the congregational prayer that the males lead and the females follow. And the Quran would recite from the Mus'haf, the few pages that were put together at that time in a very rudimentary fashion. He would recite from that. So that's a little precedent there for us. And the need dictates that as well. And there's also a desire for us to want to try and cover as much of the Quran as possible in Ramadan, where there's a high level of spiritual awareness, which maybe we don't feel at the rest of the year. At the same time, I do feel that we sometimes get a bit lost in the how debate of Taraweeh, and we forget the why we actually pray Taraweeh or the Qiyamul Layl. It's about getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's about developing a close relationship with the Quran. And that's going to only happen if you understand what you're reciting, if you're invested in what you are reciting, if you are able to internalize those verses that you recite. And that's why sometimes it's actually best for you to focus on that which you know, which you already have memorized, even if it was when you were young and it's only small surahs, because you know them very well. You're able to spend more time actually studying their tafsir or reading an English translation before you recite, to connect to them and to internalize them better. When you're praying sometimes and you're following a mushaf or following a phone, the focus is so much on not trying to make a mistake, maintaining flow, maybe even reciting a good tajweed, that you don't focus so much on who you're standing in front of, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this isn't just a straightforward answer. It's actually not very easy to say, no, you should read a mushaf. It's better because it's better for you to complete the Quran, because the Prophet ﷺ completed the Quran every single year, and then twice in the year before he passed away in Ramadan, which is good, which which I accept, but we can respond to that by saying you can recite that outside of the prayer during the rest of the day, especially as we have so much time on our hands now. At the same time, you can see the argument then for reciting that which you're comfortable with, where there'll be no mistakes, but then you're not going to again be very adventurous, you're not going to be learning much, you're not going to be reflecting and making tadabbur on the rest of the Quran. So there's an argument for both, and I believe we should combine both approaches. Recite a little bit from what you have, and then use a digital device also for the rest of the Quran, which you've reviewed before you recite in the prayer, so that it means more in that prayer, and your Qiyamul Layl makes you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wallahu a'lam.
Subscribe to this channel, share this video, and click on the bell icon so that you can be notified with every new video at Faith IQ. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.